Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing good. I have my sister in the house, and we're here to talk today about a funny story. I'll say funny not because it's funny, but funny in the sense that it's quite sad actually. Thinking about somebody making a journey out of their home country in the quest for a better life and to end up in a very sad state of affairs where they've come back to their home country with nothing. Before I give a gist of the story, I just want to welcome everyone to today's program. I have my sister Ikuamua in the house. My darling, how are you doing?
Hello everyone, and happy weekend to everyone. I'm very happy to be here, Sita.
Yes, it's a lovely day, and we thank God for life. So, the story goes like a man has been on a ship as a ship worker for a long time. The ship plows the seas from Africa to Europe back and forth, and he's worked on this ship for a very long time. Except one day he arrives on the shores of Italy and he drops off to go get some things sorted out. And by the time he came back to board the ship had left him behind. The shock of the whole situation led this man to lose his mind. And at this particular point in time, after 40 years living in Italy, he had to take the Catholic Church and friends and family, people in the country of Italy, contacting the authorities back in Ghana to get people to have this man brought back home because he didn't know who he was anymore, couldn't really give very much detailed information about himself. And this man came back to his home country with nothing. Nothing. Now, what makes this story so tragic is this man is now, if you do the maths, he's probably in his 60s or 70s. No family member has come forth to claim him, and he has nothing. So, on the face of it, if you're thinking about it critically, knowing how the system works back home, I can clearly see that the family, even if they knew who he was, wouldn't want nothing to do with him because he's just going to be a liability. He's going to be another source of a financial drain to an already struggling family. I was gisting with my friend who's in the house with us today, and I'll let you tell her take on it. Some people are of the view that he was a useless man who came and didn't really do anything with his life, and now he's gone back with nothing. But other people have different opinions, and I just want to let my sister tell us how she felt about the whole story because I've just been so badly affected thinking about it that somebody would leave their friends, family, everything that they're conversant with to make this decision to go in the quest of a better life and to come back with nothing is tragic, and then he's not well on top of that, so it's like a double whammy. My sister, I don't want to take your spot. What is your take on this whole situation?
Well, Sita, thank you for really creating this platform so we can really talk about some of these issues because I think this is one of the most critical issues that's actually happening around the world. In the Diaspora community, and most of us either we are unaware, but people who work in the social system are always encountering some of these issues of people who have left the shores of Africa or other countries, migrated to the West, and somehow have ended up in the system.
Mm.
And their families are not aware of it, or even sometimes they might even have family, and the West, but that particular family have no idea that that is going on. So it's important that we talk about these things. We saw that this man, he's pretty old. He's been in Italy for 40 years. From the way he was talking, it looked like he had, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an expert, but he was really showing some sign of some sort of dementia.
Yeah.
Um, and this is something, it's no fault of his own.
Mm.
And these things can actually happen to anybody. It can happen to a young man, it can happen to a young lady. And if it's not that, it could also be, you know, having cancer or having any sort of sickness or ailment that will prevent you from being a productive member of society, or that can prevent you from really achieving the goal. Because when you migrate to the West, most of us are migrating to the West, whether you are coming from Mexico, you're coming from any part of South America, um, or other continents, whether you're coming from Asia, all of us are coming here because we're looking for greener pastures. We're looking for opportunities. Mm-hmm. We're looking to climb up the social ladder. Mm-hmm. But one of the things we have to pause on to say is, even though we're here for greener pastures, we should also be ready for some of the entanglements or some of the issues that we might face. Right? And most people are looking at this man. This is one of the things I don't think he was physically, mentally prepared to face. And obviously, there was some sort of disconnect where he couldn't reach people that he possibly know, and he didn't have any sense of community, right? So as a result, he's falling through the cracks. But thankfully, there was a Catholic church there who had a strong social service system that sustained him for a very long time. I think apparently he's been with them since 2012 or something like that.
10 years.
Right, 10 years. And 10 years is a long time for someone to be in a system and for nobody to trace back where someone is. Is this something that is happening all around us? Yes. Yes. There are even young people in the system where they don't have families, right? But when we are in the diaspora, as you are sitting there today with your child, you're sitting there today with your sister, you're sitting there today with your husband, there could be a day that even though you might have a job, this man had a job that he was working. He was a productive member of society, but one way or the other, he encountered something that made him who he is today. And we all can find ourselves in that situation. So how do we prepare ourselves? How do we equip ourselves? How do we become self-aware? And when do we know that we need to go get help? And we as community leaders, do we have community leaders in our community who are providing resource to such people? Or are we leaving everything to the government? Because I always tell people, government is you and I. Government is not your mayor. Government is not your prime minister. Government is not your MP or your MLA or your senator. Government is you, because you are the one that elects them, right? So as people engage in the community, do we have resources when people like that fall through the cracks? And are these people getting the things that they need, the resources that they need? So these are questions we need to ask ourselves. When you're traveling abroad, are you ready in case you end up getting a disease that is terminal, right? Are you prepared? And when you are going through that, are you calling your family member? Do you have contacts on you in case anything like that happened? The people can reach out to your family, because this guy, nobody knows his family and he has no idea. He's just giving clues. I think giving names. He said Mr. Hayford from Cape Coast, right? Then he'll say, you mentioned another name from Takoradi. Well, Cape Coast and Takoradi are two different cities, right? So obviously he has some sort of connection, but he doesn't remember, right?
You know,
What the
so
connection is, right? So that brings us back. When we are making this journey abroad, are we prepared? Are we equipping ourselves in case we face some of these challenges? Because I know of stories of two young people who came abroad and just working, they lost it in the middle of work. There was one that actually happened in a place, very old place that I knew who the owner of the company was. And it was a very tragic thing that happened. Very, very young man. I mean, he wasn't from Africa, he
they
was from
lost it.
Asia. He lost it. He lost it, right? He lost it. And at that time, now they had to call an ambulance, right? Now they had to take him, call the police, take him to the hospital, right? So it's important that I know our society really stigmatizes, right? Mental illness and all sorts of illness. We like to stigmatize it, but are we in the community? Are we creating awareness? Are we providing resources to people and let them know that it's okay? Because think about this, Sika. When you're back home, you have a whole lot of people in your community, right? You have your mom, you have your aunties,
Yeah.
you will have your cousins, you have your uncles. So even if you're going through a very difficult situation, you're going through a very difficult situation, you will one way or the other you will have someone to talk to.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
But here in the diaspora, especially if you have come and you don't know anybody,
Yeah.
who do you talk to?
Nobody.
And if you're unfortunate and you end up in a country like Germany where you don't understand the language, who do you talk to?
Yeah.
And how do you communicate? And this man, he found himself in a country where he does not even speak the language. Language barrier.
Huge.
And at the same time, facing a mental
Illness.
illness problem, right? So this is when we want to call on our community as well, because they need to be make sure that although the government offer a lot of things, that we also tap into such of those resources so that those resources will be available to people in our community who are facing such challenge. Okay. The other thing I also want to talk about is that what most people don't know, the Western world right now, we are facing a huge housing challenge. Okay? If anybody doesn't know, the World Health Organization or the UN, they define if you're spending more than 30% of your income on housing, you are facing housing poverty or housing challenge. You're not supposed to spend more than 30% of your net income on housing. Okay? So you see in big cities like New York, big cities like Toronto, big city like London, the amount of money that you have to pay for you to get a place to stay is a lot of money. So we see a lot of immigrants either clustered in small spaces that sometimes is not healthy for you, right? Or you see them, sometimes some of them are ending up being homeless, right? Because if you come and you don't have the money and the means, or somebody is not accommodating enough to take you in, you're going to be homeless, right? And if you're unfortunate, if you're a girl, and even if you're a guy, if you don't take time, even someone who provides you with accommodation, if you don't take time, the person might traffic you.
Of course.
Right? So when we are making up our mind that we want to travel abroad or we want to move to the West, one of the things that we want to know is as you're moving, do you have means of accommodation? Do you have a place to stay? Right? And if you don't have a place to stay, then it's you have to make sure that you're ready for the challenges that might come. And some of those challenges might mean you end up on the streets. And when you end up on the street, anything can happen to you whilst you're on the streets, right? So it's important, even for us that live abroad right now, it's important that you make sure you are equipping yourself financially, you are upgrading yourself in every avenue. Because, last time I was listening to, Ontario is our biggest province here.
Yeah.
And you know that since the 1970s, Ontario has not built any additional affordable housing.
Since 1970s?
Yes.
50 years on?
Yes. Ontario has not built any brand new affordable housing. And the waiting list for you really to get inside affordable housing is almost 10 years. So if you are migrating to a place like Canada, these are some of the things you want to look at, even whether you're coming as a student or you're coming through the skilled labor program, whichever way you're coming through, you want to make sure that you try as much as you can. If you're coming to the US, you want to try and avoid big cities like New York, big states like New York. You want to try and avoid big states like California, because you are most likely going to be in one of those situations, because it takes a lot of money for you to even find proper accommodation, right? And even if you're coming as a skilled labor, it's going to take you a long time for you to really earn some very good income, for you to really find a better place to stay. So please do your research. Is the place I'm migrating to, is it affordable compared to somewhere else? Don't just say I've gotten visa, so I'm carrying myself and I'm going, right? So this is some of the things that I want all of us to think about, right? Whether housing is a very critical thing, and housing can really make you or break you as someone who is living in the diaspora. Because if you don't take time, like I once was had to run away from, an oncoming bullet, right? And because of that, I decided to make a better choice for myself, right? So we heard incident just a few years ago where somebody had returned back from a funeral, and she was an innocent buyer, a stray, and then hit her, and she's no more. Up to today, we don't know who took her life, right? So it's very, very important that when we are traveling, or we've made the decision to live in the diaspora, that we think about our accommodation, our housing, right? Because this man was obviously lost it.
Yeah.
And he was on the streets.
Yeah.
That's why the Catholic Church picked him up.
Yeah.
From the streets.
Yeah.
And the man was there. The priest was saying that he's not the only one. Some of them are on the streets, and because it's cold, they've resorted into taking excessive alcohol. And one of the things that people don't know is that when we were in the pandemic, most of the people that died during the pandemic were people in such situation, people who had suffering mental health, and people who were also who took in a lot of alcohol, because alcohol really destroys
your immunity too.
Yes, and really destroy a lot of things in your system. So it's important that we really think about all these things. If anything did not teach you a lesson, let's think about all the people that died in Italy during the pandemic.
Oh yeah, that was crazy.
Like, let's not forget, this just happened 3 years ago.
That was crazy.
This just happened 3 years ago. So it's important that we really think about these things. Sika, I'll pause here.
One of the things that struck me by the story was, how judgmental we can be in our society, in our community, and how this man, I'm sure, when he was leaving, people saw him going back and forth and were probably even jealous or whatever of him. What do you think happened to 18 years on a ship, going back and forth on the seashores? Anything could have happened to him. What happened to the money? Because he must have been paid for all the work that he was doing over the 18-year period. What do you think happened to the money?
You remember, Sika, he said that his money is in the bank, right? So I wonder, because I know people who are in this kind of areas. Usually, most of the time, the money is paid and it's paid into the account they usually have a US account. The money is usually paid into the account in a US, their US, what do they call it? They have a name they call it in Ghana. Those US bank accounts. They have a name they call it. Yeah. So they usually you have a US bank account in Ghana where your money, your paycheck is going to, right? Because most of the time when you are in this environment, they provide everything you need, right? So you really don't need money to, if you get off the ship, that you want to do some shopping for your friends and family, right? But really, the thing is that most of the time, this is how the embassies also fail. I'm sorry, but I want to call out our embassies, right? Because the service that the Canadian system and the American system provide for their citizens is optimal, right? Because if this guy was American or Canadian and a ship docked and he did not go on the ship,
they will be looking for him.
They will be looking for him, right? So valuing the value we place on ourselves, and I'm talking to our brothers and sisters in Africa, we need to start valuing ourselves. We need to learn to be patriotic, right? Because you see that, they have ranking for passports, right? We want to represent and put value on ourselves so that if you're doing business with someone, you're working for a company, whether you're working for them in the Middle East, they will respect you. Because at the end of the day, if they don't need your service, they won't have hired you, right? So we need to work with our embassies, right? And we also need to work on accountability, right? A registration system whereby when you're traveling or you're working for a Diaspora company, that they have to make sure that you're registered with the embassy so that if you don't go back to your country of origin, there's traceability, right? And then your family will now have information, there's record of information, or if we're not able to reach you, who do we contact to say, oh, Sika was on this boat. Sika waited 3 days, 1 week. Sika is not there. Has Sika called? Right? We are worried and we are planning to leave. Right? So it's important. And if he's not coming, we're going to be coming back in, let's say, 3 months' time. In 3 months' time, he should meet us in this port. That resource was not available for him because that value is not there, right? We always say we love our homeland. Most of us always want to plan and retire back home. But have you ever sat down and think about it? Is my life safe
and valuable?
Is it valuable, right? So these are some of the things that we need to challenge ourselves on. And I always say government is not the people we put in power. It's you and I, right? It's you and I coming together to make sure that the government is accountable and the government is putting value on we, the citizen of that country.
Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs, and even though I digress slightly, when the footballer Christian Achu of blessed memory passed on, this big point was made by a lot of people about the fact that we were sitting on the sidelines expecting Turkey and all its people to be the ones that go and get him out of the. But we have a national disaster management. It's called NADMO, National Disaster Management Organization, or something like that. It's there in Ghana. It's supposed to be a thing that when natural disasters like flooding and things happen, and you see them, they get the army and the police and whatever, and they're all in uniform and they evacuate people. But that's just on a national level, like on a local level. If we had also joined the force with our own people also going to help in the relief effort, Because when they brought him out, there was a doctor that had said that he was alive for 6 days
Yeah.
before he passed on. So they found him 6 days too late. If we also had a delegation that had gone to help the
Evacuation process.
effort, he would have still been here. Who knows?
And that's one of the things I always say. Sometimes, Sika, we always want to wait. And sometimes when people are put in charge in certain positions or people have certain responsibility, they all feel like there's never going to be a day that resource is needed, right? And because of that, there is no constant training, there's no constant recruitment, there is no standby, there's no plan, right? And even though you're saying that organization is there, it's like a book that's sitting on a shelf filled with dust. No one has thought about upgrading them. Nobody has thought about making sure that they're always going on drills, they're always ready, they have standby flights, we have allocation of travel budget, we have allocation of emergency evacuation process. What are you talking about him? You forgot what happened when they during the pandemic.
Oh yeah,
All those people that were stranded in what was it, Saudi Arabia,
China, and
China, all those places, right? Some of the MPs had to raise their own money to pay for flights for some of these people to come back home. Ukraine, have you forgotten about Ukraine? Right?
Yeah.
So it's not like they've had a lot of trials that has happened in this last 3 years, and yet they've not moved an inch, right? Because there's no accountability. There's nothing that is pushing them. Nobody is saying, what can I do to save my brother? What can I do to save my sister? Right? Because we know if this guy was David Beckham.
Oh, yes.
In fact,
yeah.
The Americans
Yeah.
will even join in.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So when I talk about putting value,
Yeah.
because most of us see
David
human
Beckham,
beings
of
as
course.
nothing,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
We don't see them as value. But when you come to the Western world and you talk to Western people,
Mhm.
toe to toe, they value people as assets. And when you have an asset, what do?
You protect it.
You protect it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
David Beckham is seen as an asset that's worth billions of pounds. He might get paid $1 billion playing soccer, but that billion, do you know how many jobs he creates?
Yeah.
Do you know how much money he brings into the British economy?
Exactly.
But we don't think like that.
No.
Right? Sorry for me to digress and get into politics, but we don't think like that. We don't place value on anything. And the moment you don't place value on anything, what do? You treat it as garbage.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what has happened. Right? It's a sad state of affairs, right? Because if we have a disaster relief group like a FEMA, right, it will be catastrophic that FEMA will not perform when there's a hurricane or an earthquake, or they realize that something has happened, and then American citizens' life are at risk, and you're sitting there and you're saying that the country where they are the ones they are with before even the president of that country will open their eyes. Americans have already blocked the airspace until all the American citizens are out. I have seen it being done. I personally know somebody that was rescued from Haiti during the earthquake by the Canadian government. Right? They had the planes there, and they packed all of them in there, and then they jetted them back here into Canada. Right? I remember there was a few years ago, there was a war in Lebanon. They went and then they packed all of them during Harper's time, brought them back. Right? So it is
was even
value.
a movie about that, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It is value you place on your people They value people as an asset. We don't. We don't. So really, Sika, that's really your answer to that question.
This story, I remember when I saw it, when you sent it to me. I was working, and through the bits of breaking between calls and whatever, when I was listening to this man. Hi, so the question I had for you, my darling, is going forward, because this is now like sugar that's already poured in the sand. We just have to hope that somebody can claim responsibility for this man, and he can at least get some help with his mental health issues, which, I'm sorry, but unfortunately I have my reservations about, knowing the system and the background that we're coming from. But going forward, because there's so many of us in the diaspora in different countries around the globe that are from Ghana, Nigeria, wherever, we're all over the globe. The globe is now a village which has bits of everybody. So if you met anyone who has come just like you and I have, in the quest for a better life in a foreign land, what would be your advice on the basis of what you've seen happen to this man for anyone?
Well, what I would say would be, I wouldn't say it's an advice, but I would say it's a recommendation, right? Um, because advice sometimes can be very subjective to people's experience.
True.
By recommendation, I always want to give my recommendation based on statistics. And one of the things, if you are listening to me, I myself was, as my actual background in education, I was a trained social scientist. So I am a social scientist. I'm actually an anthropologist, so which means I study culture and the evolution of culture. And what I will say based on that is that my recommendation, looking at the way we are brought up in Africa and how we come and merge into this Western society, is when, if you are here, whether you're in your 20s, your 30s, or your 40s, plan your retirement now.
Mm.
Okay? Plan your future now. Don't wait. So, and in planning that, you have to be very strategic. Okay? I'll give you an example. If you're a 20 something year old and you've traveled abroad, your first focus should be getting your stay.
Mm.
Okay?
Becoming documented.
Yes, becoming documented if you are undocumented.
Mhm.
After that, your second thing that you should be doing if you came here in your 20s or your 30s or even your 40s is to invest in the country that you are in. Find ways that you can invest there to secure your future.
Mhm.
The reason why I say that is that most people always first instinct is want to invest back home. When you invest back home, it's not a bad idea. It's only a bad idea if you're still planning to stay in the Western world. It's only a good idea if you're planning to move back permanently to make sure you are seeing the daily operation of your investments that you are going to do.
But that's the mistake, though, isn't it? Because, and a lot of us get trapped in that. And I'll use myself as an example. For example, when I lived in England before I moved here, and you have family back home, and they're telling you, we don't want you to get lost. You have to come back home one day. You have to buy a piece of land. You have to do this. You have to do that. But when you've left a country, and seriously speaking, after 2 to 3 years, because me, I left for health reasons, and then education came in the way, and one thing led to the other, and it's been 20 years. Next year, it's going to be 20 years since I moved completely to go live in the West. When am I going back? What am I going back to?
I know, but most people don't ask themselves that question because what people don't know is that living abroad is like being in a wheel.
Hmm.
You keep moving. You see, when you see a rat, you are in a wheel. You keep moving and moving. By the time you realize it's so many years and you've been in the same place, right? That is the reason why I'm saying if you decide that, I have my stay and now I want to invest, then pack your bags and go and stay and invest and know that you're not coming back again.
But the point I'm making is that a lot of people start off because I said those silly things when I first came to England myself too. Because I was born there, we went back, I came back, I went back and forth. But I always had it at the back of my mind because my siblings and my parents were still back there. Oh, I'm only going to do the education for a couple of years. And once that is done, then I'm going to go back. It's almost 20 years.
I know that is the reason why.
And that's the trap,
yes,
isn't it?
that is the trap. And that's the reason why you don't want to fall into that trap. So make the decision to plan early on your retirement. So if you know that you're not going to retire, because most people fall in that trap, right? But you need to come to reality. And this is where I am. Reality is my recommendation.
That is the point I wanted you to raise.
It's my recommendation that invest in the Western country where you are. Because the return on that investment in the future, if you decide that you want to go and live in Ghana or Nigeria, wherever, you can actually sell it and go. And at that time, the amount of money you have made at that time on one investment, even if you just invest in one real estate property, the amount of money you will have holding in your hand will be able for you to start a whole business and run it and actually have profits on it. Or even if you decide that you're just going to put the money in the bank and eat it till God takes you, you will still have enough. Because one of the reasons why I say that invest that money and plan your retirement early is that, Sika, do you know most people don't know that when you work in abroad, regardless of what job you do, they do take money for your retirement.
Your pension, of course.
For your pension.
Correct.
So if you come and because this trap, a lot of people fall into this trap, they will do agency. You find yourself in the trap. You do agency for 6 months. You go and stay in Ghana or Nigeria for 6 months. You are the one that is killing yourself because guess what? The time that you're old and fragile, you will not qualify for pension because you've wasted all your time working with agency. The agency too, their business, and they don't want to pay taxes because anytime that you contribute, you actually pay real taxes on your employment income. Your employer also has to contribute a certain amount of taxes.
Correct.
The reason why they form those agencies so that they don't have to pay taxes. That is the purpose of the agency. The agency is not there for them to find new jobs. They are there to reduce the amount of their tax burden and your contribution to employment taxes. So they're not there to make you happy. So don't joyride on them and think that, oh, that's an advantage. That's a huge disadvantage to you. So if you're planning to be doing 6 months, 5 months, and all those things in your 2030s, please be careful. In your 40s, please be careful. Because I could tell you there are some areas right now in the diaspora, you go and see clusters of immigrants, old men and women, who are hanging out aimlessly. Well, God forgive me for saying that, right? Why? We don't have a good community network for them. Some of them don't have a comfortable place to stay. Some of them are just like, they're just there, right? And some of them, the money they are making right now from the government is not enough even to rent a 1 or 2 bedroom.
Yeah.
Because right now, if you don't qualify for pension, the money that they will give you is not even up to $2,000. How much is a 1-bedroom apartment in Toronto right now? It's way more than that. So even if you have to use, even if it's $1,200, then you are left to date. Let's not forget, you have medication. You are old, you have to buy your diabetic medication. If you have blood pressure, you have to buy it. All of these things can, if you don't take time, it can make you like a wonderful gentleman we saw, our grandpapa, our uncle, our brother that we saw, right? So being proactive, that as you have a ride abroad, once you get documented, you have to first think about how you're going to invest, ways you're going to invest. If you're not going to invest in real estate, you can invest in TFSA, tax-free savings account. If you're not going to invest in TFSA, you can buy RSPs that you can use to file your taxes, right? So there's so many things that you can do to secure your future. And all of this money is available to you the day you decided that, you know what, I'm parting ways with this country. I don't like this place anymore. I'm leaving, right? But don't do, I'll go work 3 months here, I'll go back, go and burn all the cash, come back, then you keep doing that. At the end of the day, when you're old and rigid, there'll be nothing for you. And the money they're going to give you, that money is not going to be good enough for you to get food, right? And get your medication and take care of you for you to get dentists. You need dental health. You, as you age, you need more health stuff, right? So think about your retirement, whether you're in your 20s, your 30s. Don't get so overwhelmed. Don't get so excited. And I'm speaking to our men. Just because you go back home and all those women are jumping on you like a horse, don't think you're special. Think about your future. Think about your future, right? Because there are consequences. You have to stay focused, right? Because I know a lot of people who have done really good investments for themselves that they go to Ghana. When they go to La Palm and chill, right? They are old, they are in their 70s. They go there for dancing. They go there, they have fun, right? If they come to the abroad, they are also living lovely life, even though they are in their 70s, comfortable homes, right? All these things are possible. Don't think that, because it's cold, I'm doing this, I'm going to go back. Think about everything in its entirety. As a young man, a young lady, think about your retirement. Think about this, if you had built a house 10 years ago, would that house be the same standard today?
No.
You are a planner, you are an engineer. No. Right? No. By the time that you are ready for that house, it will be so run down. It will be so run down.
You now have to go and invest more money to bring it back up to standard.
Exactly.
Yeah. And also because of all the difficulties and the struggles and hardships back home in Africa right now, investing in a place that you're not living yourself and expecting other members of your family or your friends to be the people that are looking and are custodians of your property is stupid. I'm sorry, but it is. It is. How many of your family members can you trust? That you go and give, here's 100,000. I'm planning of coming home in the next 10 years. I need to buy, so use it to buy a plot of land. Even if they use it to buy it, do you and I not know somebody who put 50,000 plus in a place, and what was the outcome of that? Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can't trust anybody. Invest that money where you are.
I couldn't really emphasize on this, right? I can't emphasize on this enough. I'm not saying don't invest back home, but if you do, you have to be careful, right? Because there are so many other people. If it's land that you want everybody to know that you own a land, in the diaspora, they sell land too. You can go and buy land in one village or one town for very cheap, maybe 100,000, right? And you just pay property tax on it every month. It's not going to be much. So that when you want to say, I have bought land and the land has appreciated, you at least have land. If it's just 1 acre, you can buy it in the middle of nowhere. You can give it to farmers and they can use it to farm here in the diaspora, right? So don't think that there's no better way for you to invest. There's so many ways that you can invest in the diaspora that will give you peace of mind. Peace of mind. Because hoarding money under your pillow is not what we are saying. Right? We want you to make sure you are building a life for yourself that is sustainable, that is realistic. Right? Yes, we want to take care of our families back home. We can take care of them. Sometimes some of the money that we are giving them to go buy land and do all these things for us, we are better off giving them that money to tell them that they should use it to settle themselves. Because that's what they use the money for anyways. They use it to settle themselves. Right? So it's important that we don't end up like him. Right? It's very, very easy. A lot of people have suffered shock and mental issues going back home and finding that the land they asked people to buy is not there. The home they told them to build is somebody's home. They were taking pictures and sending them. Like, there's just so much incidents or so many things that's happened.
Some people have actually lost their lives.
A lot of people lose their lives all the time.
Yeah.
People lose their lives all the time over these kind of things, right? But meanwhile, that money, you maybe you are probably living in somewhere in that you are sharing rooms with 4 people. Right?
Yeah, just to save
the money to go and then do these things. Some of these people have neglected their health. Some people, they are in the US, they don't have green card, they don't have health insurance.
But they have a story building in their home country.
Meanwhile, God forbid, anything happens to you, you go to the hospital, you cannot afford to pay. Where are your priorities? You know, today I was at an event. Sad story. So one of the ladies was there. One of the ladies got up and said that, and I wanted to share this on this platform because I know you have quite a lot of followers.
Yeah.
So if women, men, you're listening, that they actually are finding it very difficult for a lot of women and men of color to join the research. And based on the statistics they've actually been collecting, a lot of us are actually dying of cancer. And the cancer research, they are begging, looking, but nobody is coming it's forthcoming. Because the problem with that is, and it was very funny because sometimes you hear about things, but like, okay. And then after that, the guest of honor took the mic and said, you know what, I want to re-emphasize. What you have to know is that if they do the research and they don't have your kind, people of your caliber there or kind, for them to do the research or have them, when you fall into that category, if you end up having that sickness, you're pretty much trying their luck.
Yeah, because they don't have your type to know what will work for you.
Exactly. They don't have any subject matter. They don't have any experience, nothing to reference to say that, okay, we gave Sika vitamin D when she came in, when we did the research on such situation, and that really helped or that really improved her health, right? So these are some of the things that happen, right? Because yes, they can be an umbrella of quote unquote mental health, right? But our own could be different, right? Our own could be where maybe so many culturally different things that can, like I can give you an example. If an Oyibo man walking on his wife, having an affair with another man, might not give him a shock, right? But if an African man does, he might suffer a heart attack right away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because for us in our culture, this is huge.
Yeah.
It's huge.
For them, it's nothing big.
For them, it's nothing big, right? So I'm just using that as an illustration, right? So if you go and tell your policeman that, my husband looked in on us and he had a heart attack and instantly just passed on, you might think you are lying.
Yeah.
You might be like, okay, right? So these are some of the things we have to think about. When we are in the diaspora, we really need to think about how our own culture, how we bring it in, how we integrate it, how we integrate our own culture into the system, so that when our own brothers and sisters, we find them in such situations, right, that we're able to help, right? We're able to help. We don't want to see so much of these things, but I know this is, unfortunately, this is the reality. Because last time I was watching a guy in the UK, and I think I forgot what job he does. He was in an area because he was assigned to go do a job in a specific area.
Mm-hmm.
And then he saw one Ghana man too. The guy was begging on the streets.
I know that story. So what had happened was he's a planner, I think.
Yeah.
This guy. He deals in housing, like to see how people are living and what's going on, inspects the government's properties and all of that. That's what he does. And he met a guy picking cigarette butts from the bus stop. Why? He had come, and it goes back to the very thing that we're talking about here. He came into the country undocumented, and then he'd been there for 15 years, let's say. Then he tries to go bring his wife. He brings his wife, and he's still not documented though.
Okay.
So his wife comes. They're now living in this house. The woman is now helping pay the bills because she's also now working and whatever. They have an argument, and he slaps her, and she calls the police. And obviously, you've got to leave to go somewhere, and he's got nowhere to go. And there's also then this rule about you can't come within a certain mileage of the house. And that's how he ended up on the street.
Yeah. And once you're on the streets, that's the beginning of
the end. Deterioration.
Your deterioration of your mental health, right? The deterioration of your mental health. And I think, Sika, we can take that on another, because that's a whole different situation. But that's also another way that you can end up being homeless in the diaspora, right? So what can we all do, right? For all we know, this man could have been in the same situation.
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
It could have been the same situation. So it's important that we are very aware. If your children end up in the system, once they're 18, they kick them out on the streets and they end up being homeless. Okay? When your children ends up in the social system, once they're 18, the government, they say they're adults, they set them up and say, oh yeah, bye-bye. And if those children are not capable of taking care of themselves, they will also end up on the street. So don't think that no one should look down on this man. No one should think that they're above this man. No one.
It's so far away from me.
It's never so far away.
No, it can't happen to me.
It's not so far away from you. It's not far-fetched away from you. Some people, it's their children that are saving their dignity, right? Some people, it is their, the community that is saving them. Some people, is their pension that is saving them, right? So it's important that as we live in the diaspora, we really think about everything that we do. We shouldn't think that things are everywhere. Most people, I always laugh when people say, oh, if you're living abroad, if you're hungry, the government will give you food. Who told you that? Right? Who told you that? Do you know how many people that are homeless? 11,000 people are homeless in this city. 11,000 people.
And it's growing.
And it's growing because we are currently in a housing crisis.
And a recession
on top of that. Like just 2 years ago, we had so many vacant homes. Now all of a sudden, boom, COVID came. People were indoors doing nothing. They also decided to double or triple themselves, right? We've had high influxes of immigration that come in.
And pregnancies.
So, and a lot of things, and the cost of living has gone up.
Through the roof.
Mortgage rate has gone up. And mortgage rate goes up, everybody has to raise their rents, right? But your wage is not keeping up with inflation, right? So all of things that are not certain, there's so many uncertainty things. So it's important that no matter where we find ourselves, one way or the other, right? You don't want to carry all your money, take it back home. Because when you hit the brick wall here, Canadian government will ask you, where did you get that money from? You cannot just go and carry that money and say, I'm putting in the bank here. They will start asking you questions, right? So it's important that we always plan ahead, right? Plan early. Once you get documented, your next move is to plan your retirement. Don't invest all your money back home, invest in yourself, invest in the diaspora, make sure you have a good health plan, right? If you live in America, you don't have a good health, you don't have health insurance, make sure you get one. Secure one. It's always best to get one when you're young, right? If your company is not paying, most of these things are all tax deductible, right? Go get one. Register a business that will allow you to use it as a tax write-off, right? And having a business does not mean you have to have a shop or anything. You can have a small little consultancy. If you're running a small little hair shop in your house, you can register it and use that as a business to get your health insurance coverage done and do all of that. There's so many things that you can do to help yourself.
What are your last words? Because I think that there's so many, this whole thing about diaspora living has to end up being some kind of a series that we keep coming to every now and again, just to bring and draw it home and bring the awareness. But for today's story about this old man, what are your last words to anybody who has listened to us today?
My last word really is, don't try to live in isolation. It's important that we keep some things to ourselves, but sometimes it's important that there's always somebody who knows where we are and knows what we are up to. And sometimes it has to be two people, right? That knows where we are and knows what we are doing, especially if you are from the African country where your country does not place value on you, right? Sometimes we come and we want to copy Oyibo life, but we have to understand that Oyibo, the government treat their people as assets, right? In fact, if we start going to the constitution, if you have children abroad, the children are not yours. They belong to the government.
That's right.
Right? They are not yours. They belong to the government. Right? So it's important that we understand the system, right? And that we make sure that we make the right decision. You know, this is a place that is between heaven and hell, right? So don't think that because you are in the diaspora, you can never end up homeless or you can never end up on the streets. It's very important that you understand that fact, right? And because of that, you need to prepare yourself. You need to make sure that if you see any signs with your family members or anything of you get help, right? There's no stigma, right, around mental health. There is so many people. You can call them, you can call your helpline, don't be afraid. If you need to take time off work, talk to your supervisor. Don't let people stigmatize you because you are having issues, right? Because sometimes we all go through issues, especially, most importantly, I want to talk to women. When you have your first child, first and second, especially those who have kids one after the other, your chances of slipping into mental health is very, very, it's at least 99.9%. So if you're a husband, you're listening, that's not the time you want to abandon your wife and start gallivanting around. You want to be there to support her, right? Because those are very tricky times, right? A woman having new babies, if you are back home, your mom will come and stay with you, cook for you, clean for you, but here you have to do all of that by yourself, right? So all of these things, we'll talk about it, right? But it's important that we understand how mental health is very important for our well-being.
Thank you so much, my darling. This has been a very informative, session that we've had today. I just really hope that people are not just listening to this and being our judgy selves and thinking, "Oh, he messed up his life. That's never going to happen to me." But we actually take the lessons that have to be gotten out of this whole experience and make sure that we are securing ourselves. And for me, the biggest point that my sister made today is about this whole investment thing, because I've seen too many people do it. I knew this. There was this man in England who died on a bus because he was working 3 jobs. He'd built a house 3 stories high in his village that he never saw. He never slept one day in that house, and he was dead, and that's it. £50,000 in his bank account. He wasn't even documented on top of that. So that just goes to the state too. So it's just crazy. It's crazy that we do these things and we think that the only way to prove that, yes, we've arrived is to do all these things. How many people in England would live in council housing? 3-bedroom council housing. You see, there's 2 separate families all living together in this little space, right? And yet they've got 6-bedroom houses back in their home countries, not educate their children, put them into anything because they have this mind, oh, when I go on pension and these kids grow up, they're going to leave home and then my wife and I will go back to Africa. And it never happens. It never does. So I went to the Wise is Enough. Thank you so much, my darling, for your valuable input today. There's going to be a lot of conversation around this because this story has really triggered me in a very funny way. And I hope that people would hear and put things in place to make these things a possibility. We should talk about, you talked about investing in the diaspora. We should pick that as a topic and talk about some of the things that can be done in investing in the diaspora to help us all. So thank you so much, my darling. I learn so much from you all the time. You are the queen of Adri and the mayor of Calgary to be. So thank you so much.
Thank you to Sika. I take it.
Yes, you are.
I take it. I take it by faith.
Yes, please do. We'll vote for you. Don't worry.
Thank you to everyone listening to us.
Yes.
Please continue to share these videos. We want people to learn. We want to really make an impact and transform minds, change lives as well. So please share, subscribe to Sika's channel if not already subscribed. Encourage your friends to listen, right? They can always play in the background once they're doing something because we always have a nugget or two, something for you to learn, something for you to really take and put it in your pocket and walk with it. So please continue to share the love and also subscribe. Okay? Thank you.
We love you. Have a fantastic night. Bye-bye.